This happened in October of 2018. It was during the time when I was working at a riding stable. This is by far the freakiest thing that's ever happened. It started off with me mucking out stalls and taking horses in and out of pastures, etc. Around 12:30 p.m., my mom came and picked me up from work. Since I work at 8:30 a.m., I work for the morning hours and then I have the rest of the day off. As I got in my van with my mom, she said that she drove past a cornfield a few streets down from the barn. What she saw while on my way to get me was a clown. I had asked her what the clown looked like, and she gave me a brief description of the clown. The clown looked like the Pennywise from the It movie from 2017 remake. My mom said, I couldn't get a clear view of it, but that's what I remember what he looked like. As my mom said that, I questioned her on what street she saw the clown at, and when my mom told me that the cornfield was not far from a trail, I knew what she was talking about. The trail my mom was talking about used to be a train track many years ago, but ever since the train track was removed, people used it for many purposes, like hiking, dog walking, dirt biking, etc. My mom wanted to take the trail that was by the cornfield, the one where she saw the clown. I was going to tell her that it wasn't a good idea, but she insisted we go and do take my dog there, since my dog was a German Shepherd Golden Retriever mix, so he was about a few months old at the time. He wasn't really big, but he was always rambunctious, so we had to walk him every day. It was a pain, to say the least, but fun too. My mom drove down a road where she took me to drive to and from work and riding. It was a quiet road and it never got busy. When my mom got to the cornfield where the trail was, she parked her van and me and her took the dog out. We couldn't see the clown, but I wondered if he ran off to hide or something. I didn't want to look for the clown, so we started walking down the trail. It was surrounded by trees with leaves changing colors. It was fall, to which it was my mom's favorite season. As we walked down the trail, we let my dog go and run and do his own thing. After a few feet away from the van, I noticed a dirt bike on the ground. Upon getting closer, I looked to see that the bike had been there for a while. Unsure if the bike was stolen or not, I noticed some damage done to it. The tires were slashed and the chain was broken. The bike seat was also ripped. I looked around to see if anyone was around, but couldn't see anyone. Thinking whoever left the bike was taking a piss or something, my dog was staring at something in the wilted cornfield. I walked up to my dog and grabbed his leash to be safe. When I got a hold of the leash, I looked up at the wilted cornfield. Winter was approaching within a few weeks, so it was normal to see most of the cornfields wilted in the area. I looked to see a figure in the cornfield. That was what my dog was looking at. My mom was a couple of feet behind me, so she wasn't so far behind. I could see that the figure looked like the clown my mom saw earlier. He looked to be about 6 feet tall. He was medium build and he did look like the clown my mom described it to be. I wasn't sure why he was standing in the wilted cornfield, but I had no idea what his plans were. As I stared at the clown figure, it turned around to face me, and I could see that the clown had an axe in his right hand, and that was when shit hit the fan. To the right of the clown, I could see at least 3 or 4 men dressed in black about a few feet away from the clown. I was nearly pissing myself as I wondered about what those men were here, and if it was private property or something, why couldn't they have just told us to leave? The clown slowly began to walk towards me and my dog. I almost froze in fear at this point. Suddenly out of nowhere there was a blood-curdling scream from somewhere in the forest. It sounded like a woman was screaming, and I had lost my shit right then and there, so I booked it down the way I came with my dog, not looking back. When I caught up with my mother, I told her to run, and we did so. Despite my mom having breathing problems, we ran all the way back towards our van. As soon as we got in our van, we looked back to see if the clown was behind us. There was no one following us, thankfully, but we didn't want to stay to find out. My mom drove down the road until we got to our hometown, looking occasionally for any vehicle that may be suspicious. When we got back, we reported the clown incident to the police, and they went to the location where we found the clown. Shortly after that, we headed home without any hesitation. The next day, my mom got a phone call from the police when she picked me up from work, and what they said will forever send chills down my spine. My mom told me that the clown with 3 or 4 men were luring people into the trail we went to. They had found a few bodies of people, one of them being a 6-year-old girl. I was sickened by what the police found, knowing that those men were waiting for me, and possibly my mom and dog in the cornfield. If my dog hadn't alerted me and my mom about the clown and his men, I wouldn't be alive today. Let this be a warning. If you see anyone wearing a clown mask in the forest or cornfield, run away from it. Don't stay with the clown if you want to stay alive. Now, this took place when one of my friends was doing hiking and hunting at the time. This was during the fall season somewhere in the US. I can't remember where in the US, but let's just say that it was somewhere in Washington. Now, my friend at the time of the story, I'm gonna call her Ivy. Ivy used to do hunting and fishing, and as well as was hiking at the time. But after this experience, she stopped doing those stuff for a while. Now, to give a bit of context, she was going on a hunting trip by herself, as of course her husband had to be at work. She went to this one beautiful forest area where she liked to do hunting, and it was sometime in October when this took place. When she was there, she ended up taking what seemed to be her gun and other stuff, and she started hiking down. She took one of her dogs, which his name was Max, and they went through the forest together. As they were there in the forest, that's when Ivy started looking for stuff like elk and even deer. The bucks of the deer were pretty big game and jackpot against the hunting. Now, Ivy was at a hunting tower and she was looking around, seeing if she could find anybody there. She couldn't see anybody, but she did see another hiker passing by, and she waved to them. Now, as she was looking for anything, she couldn't find anything within the hunting tower, so she and her dog continued on. When they had walked for quite a while, it was starting to get a little dark, and they didn't find anything. However, Max all of a sudden looked up. Since he was a black lab, he was alert and looked over in one of the directions of the forest. At first, Ivy thought that he might have spotted a critter and said stuff like, "You see that? Go after him, boy." But the dog did not move. He just stood there. That's when Ivy started to get a little creeped out. Since Max wasn't moving, she wondered if he saw something. She looked into the woods, but of course she couldn't see anything. Now it was starting to get dark, so the sun was setting, but however she noticed something what seemed to be maybe 15 or so feet away. It seemed to be like a huge blob of black. It obviously had red eyes that was staring at them. Now, Max started barking aggressively in defensive mode, while Ivy just sat there, unsure of what this creature was. At first she thought that it could have been a bear, but the possibility of the bear had problems as well. And this thing was 9 feet tall. It didn't look like any bear. Whatever it was then heard a crack of dawn, which seemed to be a crack of the leaves, and this creature turned around and ran back in the other direction, letting out a really loud echoing scream. Now, of course, Max didn't go after the creature, but that's when Ivy got herself and Max out of that forest and back onto the path where she went to get her into her car and drove off. Now, obviously on the way home, Ivy was quiet as she didn't say anything as to what this creature was. She obviously couldn't really tell if there was anybody around, but whatever it was definitely no bear or other animal that she's ever seen. It really frightens her knowing that there was someone in the woods, or whatever that thing was. She told her husband about it, and her husband wanted to believe in her, but he was quite skeptical and was also paranoid about whatever that monster or creature was. Now, Ivy didn't go hunting or fishing or anything like that for at least a year, and a year later she finally got the courage to go back, but this time she does not go alone, as she goes with her husband now. Still to this day, Ivy is still not sure what that creature was that she saw in the woods. She had thoughts that it could have been a bear or something much more worse. She doesn't even know what that creature is to this day, and still to this day, it is still a question as to what she was looking at. She doesn't really know what's really out there. So this happened to a friend named Jasmine at the time of the story. Now Jasmine was in college, and this was back sometime in 2018. It was around fall at the time, and Jasmine was in college working on getting her bachelor's degree as well as a degree in Fed Tech. As Jasmine was there, she liked to go out into this really nice park that was not far from the campus. Now, while she was there, she usually goes there to enjoy her time alone, as it's pretty much her calming place. Sometimes she would go and study there, and sometimes she would work on her homework around there. And there weren't really too many kids around there. There were a few kids that did smoke, but of course, that's just them. And some just hang out. However, it was one day when it was a lot cooler in the fall, and Jasmine was really stressed out due to upcoming projects and stuff for school where she needed some time. She got out and she decided to go to the park since it was a lot calmer. She was the only one at the park this time, and while she was there, she didn't really mind being by herself. This meant that she didn't have to deal with any hassle of students or teachers, and she was actually feeling really content with herself. Now, as she was pretty much chilling by a creek not far, she ended up looking to see that the other side of the creek was some sort of black bag. At first she thought that it could have been somebody dumping their trash, but something really was suspicious about it, and Jasmine even knew what it could possibly be. So she goes over there and looks around to make sure that nobody was watching her, and when she opened the bag, she was in shock. She immediately stopped. Obviously, she found that there was a body of what appeared to be a 19-year-old girl, and she looked like she was decomposed a bit, so she looked like she'd been dead for at least a week or so. Jasmine nearly puked, but when she looked up, she ended up seeing what seemed to be a person standing about maybe a couple feet away, staring at her. Now Jasmine looked up at that figure, and she asked who he was, but he didn't say anything. I didn't even think he acknowledged that Jasmine was there, and he was staring directly at her. Not moving, not saying anything, nothing. That's when Jasmine ends up running out of the forest and the area as fast as she could. But of course, on the way back to the campus, she heard footsteps behind her. Now at this point, she was shitting herself, knowing that this person could follow her back to the campus. But when she got back to the campus, she saw what seemed to be a security guard, and of course, whatever this man was, just stared at her from there. Now, Jasmine did report this to the guard, and of course the security guard went in the forest chasing after that guy, who turned around and ran back in the way he came. Now, of course the man disappeared and the security guard came back, and Jasmine explained to him about what she had stumbled across when she was at the park. She told the entire campus about it, and of course police were there and they recovered the body. Once they recovered the body, they ended up pretty much doing an autopsy, and it turns out that this girl that Jasmine found the body of had been dead for at least a week or two. And since she was decomposing, it turned out that she apparently was murdered by someone, but there was no traces of who murdered her or what had her fate been. What really shocks everyone is that the campus was pretty much closed at Forest for Off Limits for at least a month or two. And since then, Jasmine never went back there by herself. If she were to go back there now, she would only go with a friend or so. But she would never go back there by herself again. She still wonders who this girl could have been. She could have been maybe a student at the college, but there was no really real question to tell as to who or what did this to her. And of course, whoever put her body in a bag was obviously trying to hide evidence that whatever it was happened to her was there. Now, Jasmine still thinks about this incident to this day, even though it's been a couple years. But she's not sure who this person was that was watching her view the body. Could this person maybe have been the one who killed the other girl? That still questions Jasmine to this day, and she even still wonders what would the alternative have been if she had not noticed that man.